All right, we're back with another video for Victorum Gaming, and this is for SPQR. So this is another part of our sort of faction overview series. First off, we started with Athens. This next one is going to be focusing on Britain as a faction. And as with every faction in the rulebook, they start off with breaking down a little bit about the history of the faction. So it's usually a couple pages of that, when and where these factions were sort of relevant in history, and then it starts breaking into the actual units and stuff themselves. So as always, we'll start off with the hero information there. We'll move on to any other characters. The Britain faction is a little bit different than most. Then we'll jump on to the regular units, talk about those, and then moving on to named heroes. And again, another cool feature with SPQR is that every faction has its own unique missions in addition to the standard ones, but that's something that we'll do in a different series. So coming right back to the beginning here and taking a look at the hero. So we start off with 45 denarii, and pretty standard across the board here. Ranged 1, melee +2 to melee dice. Really good on the agility compared to some of the other heroes though, +2. Bravery +2 is pretty standard, and no armor, and starting off with the stock 2 wounds. So as with the Athenian hero, there are quite a bit of options here, so this is really a large toolbox for you to really customize your hero however you might want to build them. So many options are available to sort of have a pretty diverse list of heroes for your British army. So let's just run down the list here. We got small shields, large shields, leather armor, chainmail, about as heavy as it gets, but we also have helmets, short spears, daggers, axes, great axes, which is pretty unique to the Gauls and Celts, those type of factions. So Germanians, but not so much in the Greek world. But anyway, axes and great axes are really great for offense there. Swords, two-handed swords as well, slings, horses, and 3 javelins. So really, again, you can build just about anything out of these heroes. And noticeably, a lot of the heroes for the factions are sort of stock at 50 points, or 50 denarii rather. This guy comes in at 45, so a little bit of a discount there. Okay, and again, well worth investing some points in for multiple heroes, depending on how many or how big of a game you're playing. So where Britain is a little bit different than basically everybody else is that they have this interesting druid character where they, since this is a historical game, by all means it's not fantasy or anything, but this is one part where the game kind of combines some sort of pseudo magic abilities here. So the druid is another type of character or hero, 75 denarii, and then some interesting stats here. So no ranged whatsoever, melee of only +1 and only 1 dice, no agility bonus, pretty nice bravery bonus, no armor bonus, and 2 wounds. They can get daggers and swords, basically, just to be a little bit more useful in close combat if they find themselves there. But really, you're buying them for their 2 abilities here. So the first one is called Blight. The presence of a druid did not just bolster the morale of the Britons. Their enemies were rightly or highly fearful of their powers too, and were vulnerable to curses laid upon them. Before a battle begins, the British player may select any one hero in the enemy warband. That hero will suffer a -1 penalty to any characteristic of the British player's choosing for the rest of the battle. So immediately it's just a straight up debuff on one of the opposing heroes. So if you take multiple druids and you start just debuffing pretty much all of their heroes, this could be pretty nasty. And you don't have to roll for it, it just happens. And if they are only running a few heroes or even just one hero, depending on the size of your game, that can be pretty nasty too. The other ability, Druidic Presence. The Britons believed their druids could work great magic, and the presence of one greatly bolstered their faith in victory, while their enemies quailed under what the druids might do to them. A druid may not be challenged by an enemy hero, though he's free to issue his own challenge. In addition, any British unit the druid leads may reroll any of its own melee dice in close combat, which is really nice. So this guy isn't going to be very survivable. Obviously, we see no armor, and really at best having a sword for a parry. But +1 melee, +1 or just 1 melee dice. He's not going to really want to be in the thick of the fighting so much, but between the blight and then this ability to reroll dice, packing him in the right unit with, even paired with another more combat-oriented hero, this druid can really definitely make his points and presence felt here. So a worthwhile investment. And really, again, sort of one of these pseudo-magical abilities that you really get with the Britons. Next up is another kind of interesting feature. They have access to chariots, but it's really more of a mount for a hero. So let's run through the stats as normal here. So 40 denarii, no range, move of 6, +1 melee, 3 melee dice, which is really nice, a -1 to the agility, bravery +2, armor +2, and 4 wounds. Comes with basically horse, large shield, short spear. So 2 special rules that go with it here. So battle platform. A hero may start the battle on board a chariot, effectively becoming 1 unit. While the hero is mounted, the unit uses the chariot's characteristics for movement, close combat, and being attacked by ranged weapons, but the hero performs his own actions, may use any talents, and the chariot uses his bravery score. If the chariot is attacked in any way, any damage caused is deducted from the chariot's wounds. If the chariot is destroyed, roll a dice. The hero loses this many wounds. If he still has wounds remaining, the hero is placed on the table within 3 of the chariot's last position. The hero may leave the chariot at any time by performing a move or melee action, and may board it again the same way. However, the chariot may not perform more than 1 move or melee action at any turn in which he leaves or boards it. So you got this cavalry minion unit, but then really it can also become sort of a way to tow your hero around the battlefield and basically acts as extra ablative wounds for it. So you don't want to take the chance of having the chariot die on you and then rolling really high and just having your hero straight up die. So maybe using 1 or 2 wounds of that to soak up some extra damage, and then basically just getting off when you get to where you need to go, or when it's more advisable to leave the chariot. The other thing down here, a chariot must be assigned to a specific hero, not a druid, before the battle starts, and each hero may only have 1 chariot. If a chariot cannot be given to a hero, it may not be used. During the battle, no other model may use the chariot except the hero it was assigned to. So a little bit of restriction there, but again, the ability to get around the battlefield and again, have these extra ablative wounds is a really cool feature for the Britons here, and very in character with, I guess, the way that they were historically. So then we move on to some of the more regular, maybe standard minion type units. So again, the Britons do have a very good range of types of units. So we got cavalry, warriors, sort of hand-to-hand infantry, all kinds of different things. So they're horsemen here. Pretty generic cavalry, but again, multiple uses. So we got 20 denarii here as the base cost. Range +1, melee +2, 2 melee dice, no agility bonus, only bravery +1, and armor +1, and 2 wounds, of course, because of cavalry. And basically the equipment, obviously a horse, short spear, and then a small shield. And quite a few options here. Up to 2 javelins per horseman. So if you want to have this be like more of a light harassing unit, that works there. You can give them leather armor if you want to get some more, a better armor save, or helmets if you want to be even cheaper. You can give them swords too, if you want a little bit more staying power in hand-to-hand combat. Just being able to parry is nice. And then you do have the option to also equip a horn for that extra action once per game, or standard, just to reroll your bravery, will to fight kind of things. But really, and they also have that hit and run ability, so they can get in, do some damage, and then get back out. So quite a good range of abilities here for them, but definitely not a heavy cavalry unit. I mean, the leather armor there, if you go like kind of all in on points here, it's going to get expensive, but it's certainly a capable medium cavalry unit, depending on how much you upgrade them with. But several small units of these guys with maxed out javelins and maybe like a helmet too, just to get a little bit better armor, could be really nasty, especially with hit and run and stuff like that. If they do have to get in there for a sort of a finishing charge, they do still have those short spears. So really cool. Then another interesting unit that they have access to here with the Britons is the hunting dog unit. Really interesting. So kind of a hybrid unit, of course. You got the tribesmen and the hounds, so 9 denarii to start with. Stat lines you can see there. The tribesmen are really just there to keep the dogs under control. They're not going to do too much. They do have 2 melee dice each, though, but only at +1. The hounds, on the other hand, is really where it's at and where these guys get deadly. +3 on the melee dice roll, 2 dice apiece. Extra agility, no armor whatsoever in this unit, and a wound apiece per tribesman and hound. But the tribesmen do have short spears, but then teeth and a bite worse than the bark for the doggies. So basically treating it also as a short spear. So you can spend some extra points to upgrade the tribesmen here, helmets and swords. It's questionable necessarily how much it is worth to dump extra points into these units. I mean, the helmet really just gives you that +1 armor, but that's, again, just for the tribesmen, not the dogs. So really this whole unit is about getting the dogs and delivering them into your opponent's unit. The swords, an interesting upgrade there, takes it to 12 points a piece, though. So, I mean, being able to have that parry is, with only the +1 to the melee, it's a little questionable. Again, if you want to really add more points to this base cost here, it's probably more effective to just have a larger unit. But anyway, dog handlers. So, 2 special rules here. A hunting dogs unit must have at least 1 tribesman dog handler for every 4 hounds or part thereof at the start of the battle, and may not have more tribesmen dog handlers than hounds. So, and then the other special rule here: let slip the dogs of war. So long as at least 1 hound remains in the unit, the hunting dogs increase their move to 10 while performing a melee action. So these guys do have some scary speed, and if you can catch an opponent with a good-sized unit of these, it can be pretty nasty. They're going to hit pretty much most of the time with that +3 to melee, and with the charge and then the short spear, effectively with for their bite, this is a nasty little unit. So, and again, other options there. So a large unit to really scare an opponent, or maybe even some smaller ones as sort of flanking, harassing units. These guys can certainly go after lighter units, even like a light to medium cavalry unit, like a horseman equivalent there, or small skirmishing type units like archers, javelin men, peltas, that kind of stuff. They have the speed to get there, and basically once they make contact, unless you're somehow or for some reason charging into like a heavy infantry or cataphract type unit, these guys are going to do some work for you. You just want to make sure that you can actually get them delivered. That 0 armor really is going to be the Achilles heel there. So, really cool unit. Definitely should be a part of pretty much every Britain army, unless you're really just doing like a themed army that wouldn't include them. Then here we get finally to the warriors. Your stock infantry unit, and you'll see a lot of similarities here when down the road we'll cover the Gauls and then the Germanians and so on. But your warrior unit comes in at 8 denarii base cost, range +1, melee +2, melee dice to their agility and bravery at +1, no armor, because you have to buy some if you really want that. And of course the 1 wound. They do come with large shields and short spears, but again, lots of upgrades here depending on how you want to customize these guys. So you can load up on the javelins and have this be really like a skirmisher unit that'll harass people. If you want to start bringing in some armor, you can give them leather armor, which is not too bad, really. Not really going to affect the movement, and still a decent cost per unit. If you want to kind of make these guys medium to almost heavy type infantry, you can go all out and spend 12 denarii a piece on chainmail shirts. That's going to take them to 20. Assuming you don't do any other kinds of upgrades. Again, you can't combine armor types, so helmets would be something entirely separate if you want to just go as light armor as possible. But that would still take them to 10 points a piece, or 10 denarii a piece. On the offensive side, you could get them swords for 3 denarii a piece, which combined with large shields can really make them pretty durable in combat. But if you don't take the armor, like with chainmail perhaps, or even leather, they're not necessarily going to stick around too long if the opponent is able to finally push some damage through. But really, if you want to go all out on these guys, these can be fairly similar to how like a Roman legion unit would fight, and similar in points cost too. So, but these guys also have some other abilities, and as is very common throughout these Britain lists and Again, Gauls and Germanians, you do have access to a horn and a standard. And then these guys come with 3 special rules, which are really cool. So we have what's called Skyclad. So basically, if you go into battle naked, so if you don't take any armor other than that large shield, and the models are wearing no clothing at all, they gain +1 bonus to their melee checks, which, moving that to +3 and 2 dice apiece is not terrible. Strength in numbers too, and again, this type of army, again, along with Gauls and Britain or Germanians, is going to be more of a horde army, as opposed to trying to make this like a small elite army. But anyway, a unit of warriors gains much of its courage from its numbers. So if the unit has 10 or more models, it gains +1 to its bravery. If it's 20 or more, +2 to bravery checks, which again adds to that durability. They're not going to run as much. You're not going to lose extra models. So well worth maybe making this a sort of a solid core of your army. Again, unless you're doing some kind of theme, maybe more of a cavalry theme or something like that. These guys are actually your bread and butter and will do very well. So depending on how you want to get them out, of course. So again, if you go all out on these guys with chainmail and swords, you're already at 23 points apiece, practically a Roman legionary at that point. So it's that whole quantity versus quality debate. But there's no reason you can't have both types of versions of that in a list, and with different purposes too. And again, that option to buy 3 javelins there and sort of make these guys units of harassing infantry is another thing to consider there. All right, then we move to something called the Tribesmen, also clocking in at 8 denarii. Range 1, melee 1, 2 dice on that for melee, and again, bravery and agility at +1. These guys come stock with a sling, though, and sling is really, in some ways, like the best missile weapon in the game here, with a 30-inch range, but very slow rate of fire, because you do have to spend a special action to reload it, so really you're firing once a turn. But putting these guys in a great position and just sort of pecking away with slings every turn is really cool. They do have some other upgrades too, so you can buy up to 2 javelins for 2 denarii apiece. So if you do need to move up and do some close work, having javelins is pretty cool too. There's no restrictions on how many of those you can throw. You can give them some armor with helmets. Questionable if you really want to spend points on that. You can also go even further with leather, small shields, and swords. So again, you can kind of transform these guys into almost a medium infantry unit. Similar to the warriors, they do have strength in numbers, but they also have hit and run. So depending on what you're really trying to accomplish with these guys, they can serve a little bit of a different purpose to the warriors. So being able to rush in with a whole bunch of these guys, if you do go that upgrade route with swords and shields, cause some damage, use your strength and numbers ability, and then get out is really nasty. So really, again, the Britons here already have access to 2 really cool melee units, melee/range units in infantry on the infantry side, with just a whole crazy variety of possible different uses. So then we move on, and that is basically it until we now get to their mercenary list. Again, mercenaries we're going to cover separately. They can take themselves, of course, kind of representing all the different tribes, but then they can also have access to the Gaul list as mercenaries. But then we come to their 2 heroes that we get here. So we get Boudica, who's probably the more well-known of the 2, and then we got Karatakis, who clocks in at a massive 200 denarii, which we'll get to him in just a second. We'll cover Boudica first. This guy is absolutely bonkers. But Boudica, again, her history is really cool. So there's all kinds of good documentaries out there on YouTube and the interwebs. So well worth checking her out. But so 95 denarii, level 2 hero, only a level 2 hero. Seems like maybe she could have been a little bit more buffed up here. But move 6, range +1, melee +2, 2 melee dice, agility +2, bravery +4. So she's really not going to flee. No armor stock, and comes with 3 wounds. So she does have 3 talents. So careless charge, dirty fighting, and war cry. A large shield and a sword. You can put her on a chariot, which really just to keep it thematic is what you should be doing. That's kind of how she met her end too, at that battle, which the name escapes me right now, but really, again, really cool as far as her history. She does have a special role too, Thirst of Vengeance. So her fury and need for revenge is bottomless, and she's able to infect the warriors around her with the all-consuming need to destroy their enemies. Boudica and all units in the warband, but not mercenaries, within 12 of her automatically pass all will-to-fight checks. So basically, kind of a last stand ability. If we take a look at her 3 talents, Careless Charge basically doubles your move for a melee action, but the charge unit does get a free shoot if it has access to that. Dirty Fighting, as its name implies. So basically, if you hit, instead of damaging the opponent, you roll an opposed bravery check, and then you can basically get a knockdown out of it, which can be very deadly for the opposing hero. And then last but not least, Warcry. Basically, when you charge an enemy unit, the attacked unit is at -1 melee for a turn. So if you can really get a good charge off with her and follow that up with a good set of dice rolls and push that damage through, the incoming damage is going to be less for that action, which, considering, again, that your list isn't necessarily going to be full of heavily armored units, is actually a really, really cool ability. And then we move on to Karatakis. I'll get it right. 200 denarii, and you get a whole lot of bang for your buck for this, but again, 200 is a solid investment here. He is a level 7 hero, move 6, range 1, melee +3, which is really, really good. He throws 4 melee dice. This guy is an absolute beast in melee. Only agility +1, but that's all right. Bravery +3, armor +3, and 5 wounds, and then just a whole slew of talents and abilities and stuff. So if you're playing a bigger game, I would say, and you're focusing on infantry, this is your man right here. So he's got Back at Ya, Demoralized, Die Hard, Heroic Rush, Inspire, Light Foot, Warcry, and Well Planted. Comes with an axe, chainmail shirt, and large shield, so that's where all that armor comes from. And he can also be upgraded with a chariot for another 40 denarii, but that is really, again, pushing his points even further up there, or alternately on a horse, which could be cool too. Although the chariot for those ablative wounds is nice, but the horse would add an extra wound too. Then he has this awesome ability called Death to Invaders. He will not yield an inch to an invader and will act as a beacon of resistance to those he leads into a battle. If a unit in his warband fails a will-to-fight check, he may make a bravery check. If he's successful, the remaining models in the unit are removed from the table but can be redeployed within 12 of him at the start of the next phase, which, with the correct positioning and the fact that he's really, he's passing that on a 3+, is going to be just absolutely devastating. Like, if you can really get him to where he needs to be, and then if one of your units is about to bite the dust, and being able to correctly redeploy them anywhere within 12 of him, it doesn't mention any other really restrictions, you could certainly set them up on a flank of a unit, possibly in the rear again, or just in other great positions for objectives and stuff like that, depending on the mission. This is a really, really cool ability. So that easily there can make him worth his 200 denarii. But let's run through his laundry list of talents. And again, you'll see why he's really just like this combat beast here. He's got Back at Ya. So basically, if you're throwing javelins at this guy, just don't. Basically, you can pick one of them up for free each turn and throw it right back at you. Now, he's only got range +1, but it's just a cool ability. He's got Demoralize. So when he charges a unit and he outnumbers it, along with his unit that he's leading, the opposing unit has to pass a bravery check, or they basically have to move away from him, but that movement away counts as fleeing, which there's all kinds of bad effects for when you're fleeing, which that right there can already devastate a unit. So yeah, really, really nasty there. Then he's got Die Hard. So when he's at 0 wounds, you can pass a bravery check and he comes back with 1 wound. You do have to test at the start of each of his phases, but considering his armor and the fact that he's got 5 wounds, already, and he's just a nasty dude to be facing in close combat. The fact that he can come back to life for a little bit, essentially, with an extra wound is kind of ridiculous. He's got Heroic Rush, so once per game he can actually have 3 actions instead of just the normal 2. Again, a nasty little surprise depending on how you time it. Inspire, so friendly units within 12 can reroll their will to fight checks. So, and again, that's optional. They don't have to. So you can pair that at the right time with his Death to Invaders ability for best effect. He's also got Light Foot. Basically, if he has to make any agility checks to jump, basically like 1 inch over obstacles, there's no penalty to that. Now he's only got agility +1, but it's a neat little situational ability. He's also got Warcry, just like Boudica, so when charging an enemy with that ability, they're at -1 melee for the turn, for that phase, I think. So that's, again, just another nasty ability. Much less likely to have incoming attacks actually go through. And then another ability, his final ability here, Well Planted, so he can ignore knockdowns by passing an agility check. So again, only agility +1, but the fact that he has that ability is, again, just great. If a hero really is going to even get the opportunity to try to knock him down, again, with his +3 melee roll and 4 dice, with that axe that he's got, he's got all this offensive power, and he's got all this defensive power with the chainmail and the large shield, and a very healthy number of wounds. So all this huge combination of factors with him definitely makes him worth his 200 denarii. So certainly not for small games, unless you really want to test how far your luck is going to run. But in a larger battle, this guy can really take the Britons to the next level. So that's been our review of the Briton faction. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry about the shaky camera for a little bit here, but we'll definitely be back with more. Next up is, I think, Republican Rome. And again, if you guys like the video, please hit us with a like and subscribe, and we'll be back with more SPQR content from Warlord Games. Have a great day.